Golf Club, I'm Mikey Burrows. Alongside me, as ever, is Chris Awolamo. In this episode, we're joined by a man who made 172 appearances over 5 years. Welcome to the Old Golf Club, Mark John Kennedy.
Can't believe you know my middle name. Thank you. Nice to be here.
That's the beauty of Wikipedia, my friend. It is always on there. There is loads that we want to get into with you, and there is one obviously standout moment in Cardiff that we will get to very soon. But I want to take you back right to when you first joined Wolves, because you were the star of a real splurge of spending that Dave Jones made to try and finally end the wilderness years. And you did it, not quite as soon as you maybe wanted to, but that was a real kind of exciting time.
Yeah, it was really good. It was lovely to be part of. And I think I was probably one of the first signings he made. But I genuinely did think as one of those players that the club had got it wrong in terms of you had an amazing club with amazing history, but no training ground. And I always felt going in every day the foundations of the club was wrong. So they'd spent all this money on myself and various other people. And even being one of those players, I still felt they should have spent it on the training ground, the facilities, and building the club and the environment up, etc., which they've done now anyway, which is fantastic. But from a football perspective, it was amazing to be part of. It's a great club, and I had 5 great years here. I loved it, and fond memories.
Because there was you, Colin Cameron, Nathan Blake, Alex Ray, Kenny Miller, Dean Sturridge. I think it was like at least over 10 million, which in that time was an awful lot of money for a championship team.
Yeah, and I think Dave deserves a huge amount of credit because barring a couple, basically what he did was he brought in a lot of young, experienced players, if that makes sense. And I think 80% of us had already been promoted. And I didn't realise, but that's what he did. He went out and got players who'd been there, done it at a young age and still had plenty more years left on the clock. And I thought it was quite clever what he did, actually. And obviously it worked. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for that.
You've already touched on Dave as a manager, what kind of player that he brought in. But he brought in players that, I guess, that he could trust to kind of govern the dressing room themselves. Doesn't matter, okay, yeah, you've got the experience, they've been out there and got promotion before. But he brought in a group of leaders, players with experience, and that's a big thing as well as him as a manager as well. So he could just let you get on with it.
Yeah, he was very big on personalities. He liked players to run the dressing rooms. If there was a problem, he would expect us to deal with it and sort it out ourselves. He certainly wasn't a weak manager in any way, shape or form. He just liked even though we were a young group, it was quite a senior group, was in good knowledge and understanding of football at young ages. And he used to let you kind of run your own ship, basically. We didn't take the mick or anything like that, but if there's any disagreements or anything like that, he was heavily around, well, sort it out between yourselves. And if it couldn't get sorted, he would step in and deal with it.
What about the tactical side of the game? Like preparation, things like that. Is that something that can be questioned or
with Dave?
Yeah.
Do you know what? When I played football here at Wolves, it was heavily geared around a very good manager, but very good coaches. But it just wasn't complicated. Every day was crossing and shooting, possession, small-sided games. And a Saturday was pretty much there's a football, go and play, enjoy yourselves, express yourselves, and play in a Wolves way. I think football today is completely different. And the levels are so high and the money at stake and the small percentages, the micro percentages can be so valuable and getting to the next level. I don't really feel we had that back then. It was just good players put together. Maybe that's what cost us in the end in the Premier League. Maybe that's why we came up short. I mean, I know we didn't spend a lot of money when we went up anyway, which didn't help. But maybe if there's I know Stuart Gray came in, was a massive help, and tactically things started to change and stuff like that then. But Dave was very good at what he did, and I worked with him at Cardiff, and he was the exact same. And even before I went to Cardiff, he'd obviously, I know we're talking about Wolves, but he'd taken Cardiff to the Premier League and on the verge of promotion, etc., etc. And even by the time I came, he'd a playoff final and stuff like that. So he was very, very good at what he did. I would say Dave's skill set was identifying players and maximising the potential.
Because it's just interesting because I think the reason Looms brings that up is because Lee Naylor was quite critical of Dave Jones in the Premier League season, or Premiership as it was then, for kind of he felt that there wasn't enough preparation done for the individual games. But yet Paul Butler puts a lot of what happened in that season firmly down to the not spending enough money to bring in another level of player.
Yeah, I'm firmly in the not spending any money brigade, because I remember thinking, like, what players are we bringing in, where are they coming from, and I think we spent next to nothing. I mean, Lee's a good friend, I love him to bits, he's a great lad, we had a great time together, and he got on well with Dave, but I wouldn't say they had the best relationship on the planet, which I think sometimes can not cloud people's judgment, but it may paint a slightly stiffer picture than a friendlier one than somebody. I mean, they got on really well, but I wouldn't have said they had a relationship that certain other people had with the manager, which happens at every club. So that, when, for me, it was purely, I looked at it from a financial perspective.
Because I find it interesting that players can be quite honest and say we should have brought more people in, even though that could have meant you not playing. Yeah,
I mean, ultimately you have to be big enough to say that you all want the best. And players are selfish, and footballers are selfish, and they think about themselves. But ultimately, it's what's best for the club. And we all want to play football every week, but I also want to be part of a successful team. And if I'm not in that team, I know I'll progress in it because it's doing well and it's got good players and it's having success. And then there becomes a point where you go, do you know what? Now I need to play some games, and you move on. But
yeah, but as a footballer, no matter who comes in, you believe that you should play. It's like you have that belief in yourself. You should be starting, no matter who comes through that door. It's competition that should get the best out of you. But I think you see all these players, they move from club to club, and you think he's not going to play there. But they genuinely believe that they're going to go there, and they got the ability and the quality to showcase that they deserve to be playing. Or am I wrong?
No, I think you're absolutely right. But I think unfortunately some people are blinded or misguided into thinking they're better than what they are.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's about understanding where you are, where your ceiling is, where your level is, and where does that fit. So I wanted to play for Real Madrid, but I wasn't good enough. But I was bright enough to understand it was never going to happen. And I think with footballers, they can be quite ignorant into thinking that they're a lot better than what they are.
Yeah.
That's what I would say anyway.
We've kind of jumped ahead to that Premiership season. I want to take you back to that first campaign, because you as a group were flying. And then it stopped.
It all stopped. So Kevin Muscat had signed for Rangers in January, but pretty much so. It could sign for a club outside of England. So that had a little effect on what happened. Then, as discussed earlier, he nearly decapitated somebody against Grimsby, and he got sent off. In the same game, I tore my groin. And so I can't remember who it was, but somebody else was missing at a pivotal time. So we lost 3 really big players. I think add to that, West Brom went on the most unbelievable run ever. Because I think we were 11 points clear of them with 8 games left. Something ridiculous like that. And then they went on, as I said, the most incredible. I think they might, am I exaggerating? I think they won something like 9 of the last 10 games 1-0 or something. Something ridiculous. Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah.
And but I think over the course of a season, whoever goes up deserves it. You don't go up on the last 10 games. It's over 46 games. But it's fair to say we did implode a little bit. There's no doubt about that.
Talk to me about that environment, because obviously you're sitting top. You're points ahead. Obviously you've picked up an injury, but you're still around the group, and West Brom were on that run. They're surely talking about it, thinking, what, we've got to pull a finger out here, or we will get that result. Don't worry about it. Or was it complacency? I
think it was more so we'll get that result, and then the closer it got. I remember the last game of the season, needing a result, and all of a sudden it was like, oh God, we're in trouble here. And then once you don't go up, we drew with Sheffield Wednesday away. I think Adam Proudlock scored.
You made yourself available for that. Were you 100%?
No,
were you?
No, I really shouldn't have played, and I played that day. In fairness to the staff, I think everybody was under a lot of pressure, because I'd been saying for a long time, I'm not fit. Then I'm starting the game, but once you cross over the white line, you're fit, so you get on with it. So I kind of fell out with the club a little bit over that, because we then played Norwich in the playoff semis, and I think the game was on the Sunday, and I trained on the Friday, and I was like, look, I'm sorry, I'm not fit, I'm not going. And naturally, Dave was quite upset about that, and I think we lost 4-2, and I think it was on the bench for the home game.
Yeah, I think you came on in the second.
I did.
Game.
I came on. I think we won 1-0. Kevin Cooper scored a worldie. I think I came on for Kev. But no, I wasn't fit, and just to top it all off, it was a World Cup year. I actually got to the final 22 of the World Cup squad and played the last game before they went away and for Ireland, and we scored, set up a goal. But I went to Mick and said, I can't go. I pulled out of the World Cup. I just wasn't. I ended up having an operation in the end. Unfortunately, I'd wasted 4 months of telling the club I wasn't fit, them telling me I was fit, and ended up being out for another 3 months on top of that. So it was a pretty torrid time for everybody, pretty angry time.
How did you kind of come to terms with that you missed the chance to play in a World Cup final?
I was absolutely livid, and I made it clear to the club, and the only time in my life that I ever went and spoke to the big hitters in the club. When you say for 4 months you're telling everybody I'm not fit, and everybody's telling you you're okay, and I remember having quite a heated conversation with Dave at the end of the year, because he'd obviously had his end of season board meeting, and I'm assuming he got a tough time with that. And I remember he rang me and we had quite a heated conversation, and by the grace of God the season had finished. I was actually out at the time. I was out with some friends and I'd had a few drinks, and because I'd had a few drinks I said to myself, don't say anything you might regret. But I would have been well within my rights to say what I was really thinking, but I didn't. Anyway, we got on with it, and Dave's a top guy. It was one of those things. I understood the pressure he was under, and thankfully, the following year, I think I'm absolutely positive the experience of not going up is the reason why we went up the following year. No doubt about it.
Because you mentioned that pressure. I said to Paul Butler the other week that I think there was a point in that second season for you where, because you'd missed the first couple of months, hadn't you?
I came back in the middle of November.
Yeah, where around about that time, Sir Jack kind of made a comment in the media that was about like reminding Dave about the expectation, which is kind of as close to the kind of public vote of confidence, the dreaded public vote of confidence as you could get, really.
Yeah, I felt sorry for Dave, and in terms, one thing I was very aware of was the club. The club had had so many years and frustrations of not being in the top flight, and a lot of pent up energy, and with everybody was so desperate to go up and have success. It's such a big and iconic club again. Like that heavily weighed on the players. I can remember it like it was yesterday, because I remember often saying like, not my fault. I've only just come here. It's not my fault that this has happened. But that's the way it was. And I think Dave took a lot of that, of X amount of years of hurt and not having been in the top flight, and there was a huge pressure on him to get promoted. That definitely weighed heavily on the team. But I think thankfully there was a lot of big characters in there that were able to deal with it and get on with it.
So that's it's funny that you say that. I think Dave, as a manager, I think with that pressure, that responsibility, he's got to protect the squad a little bit, because that's the manager's role, isn't it? But you're saying that there was that much that it did filter into the group of players as well?
It was really obvious to me, certainly. I actually never discussed it with anybody else. Never discussed it. We used to, myself, Paul, Dennis, Michael Oakes, we lived in Manchester or in and around, similar areas. We travelled in every day together. It was never brought up, but I know in my head I used to think constantly about it. I could feel that pressure all the time. Okay. Maybe even a little more so, because he'd spent quite a bit of money on you. Dave was brilliant at protecting us and never mentioned it, and he really would look after the players. And
yeah.
I can't actually remember, guys. Like a lad who used to write for the local paper here was just so critical. Everything was bad news. If we won 5-0, it could have been 8, or it should have been 8. If we won 5-1, we'd conceded a goal. And I just remember thinking, what's this guy's agenda? And I didn't even live in Wolves, but we were all aware of it. Flip side of that is it kind of spurs you on, and it's kind of a siege mentality. Well, it's not us against them, but there's a few people gunning for us, so let's just get our heads down, crack on with it.
Did you put extra pressure on yourself? Like you say, you've already touched on it there, the money that was spent. You knew the qualities that you bring to the group, what you bring when you go out and step across that line. Did you put more pressure on yourself to deliver?
I just was quite single-minded and wanted to do... I ultimately wanted to do well for myself, but was fully aware of if I'm doing well, it'll benefit the team. And I think that goes for whether you're a goalie or a striker. So one end of the pitch, if you're doing well, only played with a handful of players who would play well for themselves, which didn't benefit the team. When you look at the career you've had, you'll have played with a few of them. So ultimately, I pushed myself for me and knew that if I was doing the business, certainly because of the position I played, hopefully it would benefit the team. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, you want to be the best at whatever you do. And we touched on it earlier, I just love playing football and, you know, amazing stadium. I mean, there's a lot of great stadiums around now, but back in 2001, there weren't many grounds like that in the Championship. So it was like playing here was amazing. It brought its own pressures because teams would turn up and go, wow, this is amazing. But, you know, when you walk out onto the pitch and you see that, you know, how colourful it is and full houses every week, you walked onto the pitch and it was like, this is me. It didn't always work like that, but
I was going to say, being a left winger, there's no hiding place for you out there.
no, I used to find playing on the far side was like the graveyard shift. You could hear everything, you know, if it wasn't going, because naturally you're near side, you can hear all those individual comments of, you know, I won't say on here, but you know, you hear the displeasure of some people, shall we say?
Can't have been that much though, because you are loved.
No, just it's not necessarily directed at you, but you're the nearest person to them.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, last week came to the Europa League game. I was in the director's box. There was somebody going ballistic behind me, and it's just people's passion coming out. It's probably the director, but no, it's just people are passionate. People just get so caught up in the emotion and of the game and the occasion, and whereas as a player or an ex-player, you're thinking, you know, calm down, don't worry, it'll happen. And, you know, eventually they scored, the team played well, we get 3 points. But as a fan, I think you want it now and not, you know, you want everything, you know, yesterday and not tomorrow, if that makes sense.
Because there is always, I say, there are genuinely, and you're a modest guy, so you won't like me saying it, but genuinely, there are a huge amount of fans of my age and slightly younger who absolutely idolise you.
Thank you very much.
Especially for that moment at Cardiff.
It was just nice to be a part of a great time. And the flip side of talking about the pressures that we felt of the years of hurt and not having promotion, and you're looking at other local clubs around. I mean, Villa were doing great at the time. West Brom had been up and down a couple of times. The flip side of that pressure was then to be part of the success completely outweighed the pressure that came with it, you know. And then, you know, once it's done, it's done. Once you win. I remember walking off at the Millennium Stadium thinking, well, nobody can ever take that away from you. Not me. What the club and the team and Dave and Sir Jack and the collective, what we'd achieved is done. It's, you know, when you wake up tomorrow, it's still there. Yeah, no, it is lovely. It is really, really nice. But you know, you've been in it a long time. It's an old cliche. You know, it's a team sport, and so it was just great to be part of it. It was a great time, and just seeing the you know, the excitement and the pleasure of, and I did an interview for the club the other day at half time, and the lady Charlotte who took me up onto the out to the tunnel, she's like, oh my God, I was at Cardiff. I was like, Jesus, how old were you? So you still get people talking about it now. It's you know.
Is that weird? Because, I mean, you can look around, everybody loves you in this room. There'll be people watching this who'll be like, oh my God. Like, I remember seeing you at a game a few years ago when you were, I think, scouting for somebody.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, that's Mark Kennedy.
Thank you.
But it is, though. It's that thing. It's, you know, that moment will live forever for so many people.
It's lovely to hear that. You know, the biggest compliment I can pay it is it's equally the same for me to be part of that. So it's just as meaningful and rewarding for me as the player that was part of it, as the fan that lived through it and shared it. So, and the same for all the players, I would imagine.
Can we actually talk about that goal as well? I mean, it is a brilliant hit, and it was only when I watched it back the other day in preparing for this where you were went after the cameraman. There was like such an outpouring.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what it was, to be honest. We had trained really hard that week, and we trained here for most of the week. And I remember just putting myself in a zone and shutting myself away from everybody and just being me and focusing. And I'd had 7 months out injured, which I touched on. Apologies for boring you about that. When the playoff final came around, I was completely done. I was cooked. When the semi-final came around, I was so tired. I'd played 35 games on the bounce, and I knew going into those games I was kind of out on my feet. And I just remember thinking, it's 3 games of your life, just run around. And when in the build-up to the week, I just completely shut myself off, and really kindly, I've never spoken to him since, but I remember Sean Newton, the last day we trained at Millennium. We trained here, and it was an evening before we went to Wales. And he came up to me and he said to me, "You're going to win us the playoff final." And I was like, okay. And he was like, "I've watched you training all week. We trained together. Newt was a good player." And he said, "I've watched you. You are in the zone." So I think, bizarrely, just because I was fortunate enough to get the opening goal, it just all came out. And that's what it was. It was just a build-up of everything: energy, frustration, excitement, joy, of locking yourself in this emotional bubble for a week. I think it was a bit like a bottle of pop that you shake. When you open it, it's just boom. Unfortunately, it was only the 7th minute, so could have easily went the other way.
See, on that, isn't that just down to maybe Sean Newton knew exactly what you needed? You know, like, because like you say, you've shut yourself away. You've just played 35 games on the bounce, you know, and as you're trying to get yourself in the zone, and maybe he just thinks, you know what, you know, because that's it. Because you yourself, I already know by just being in your company that you'll see things that not many people will see just being in the dressing room. So maybe Sean just seen that you maybe just needed those words to say, "That's exactly what I needed to."
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know about yourself, Chris, but like all players, I needed, although I had a huge belief in myself, I needed constant reassuring. And maybe that was perhaps Newt's knowing me, and that's what I needed, and that maybe was the G. I've never spoken to him about it. I'd like to ask him why. Because interestingly, when we score, he comes up to me, and I won't tell you what he said, but he's basically saying, I told you, with a few other things. And I remember him saying to me, I told you. But he was a very, I mean, Newt was amazing for us that year. He got some really, really big goals for us. He was a really good right winger. But he was a very mature player for his age. I mean, he knew the game. He understood the game. He was a really big character. He was a great lad as well. Top fella.
So what were you like at half-time in that game?
No word of a lie. I remember sitting there. This is a God's honest truth. I remember sitting there. I didn't actually say a prayer, but I remember looking up to basically the roof, which was my heaven, and saying, "Please don't take this away from me." Because we were 3-0 up. Like, the only thing you can do now is throw it away. It's the game's done. It's over. The only thing you can do now is throw it away. And I remember saying, "Please, God, please don't take this away from me." That's the God's honest truth. And then 10 minutes into the second half, they got a penalty, and I was like, "What are you doing to me?" Because I genuinely believe, and Michael Brown, who missed it, I know Brownie really well. We live in the same area, and our kids go same football, and I see him all the time. Brownie scored about 25 goals that year, but I think he'd got about 10 pens. And I remember thinking, if he scores this, we'll go. Because you cannot lose from 3-0 down. Yeah. And at 3-1, you've got it all to lose, and they've got everything to gain. And I remember thinking on the pitch, if he scores this, we're in big trouble. And Matty made a great save.
Yeah, he did, and he's certainly lived off that save.
Yeah, he's a multi-millionaire because of that, Matty.
Talking to Matty and to Paul Butler and to Lee Naylor, what they all seem to say is that the final 10 minutes of that game is one of the most surreal parts of their career, because the crowd and the way everything was going, and Sir Jack on the big screen with a couple of minutes to go, thumbs up, and all of that, and kind of, because you were kicking towards the Wolves fans, so right. You just see this amazing vista of gold and black celebration.
I mean, it's strange hearing you saying that. I don't really remember the game. I remember the goal just flying in. It's half time, the penalty. Bizarrely, the game was actually on Sky a few weeks ago, on old classics and should I say vintage football almost, and it was on that. And I didn't realise actually the chances Sheffield United had that day, and Matty pulled off an unbelievable save from deflection in the first half, missed a penalty. I think they've hit the post. It was goal line clearances. I didn't realise until I watched it, because I've never actually watched the game back. I didn't realise actually what a tough game it was. We were just lucky on the day. Everything everything just, went into, we were fortunate on the day. Everything went well for us.
Because it's such the strangest thing that with all the episodes we've done of this, and we've had a lot of Looms' era's guys in, and there is a real thing of the 2009 team always feel like they're compared to you guys, and that the fans love you guys more than they love your team.
Yeah, well, I never really experienced this. I never felt like that. I think the likes of Carl Henry, who was captain, local boy, I think he was very aware of it, and he's come in and spoke about it. I think Kites, Steels as well. I think they were aware of this. But for me, yeah, it was just get on with the job, isn't it? And football is football, isn't it?
Yeah, because you can't. It's not your fault. You can't affect it. You're in a different time, a different place, completely different team. You just focus on yourself and get on for it. Stuff like that wouldn't bother me.
Because I think his biggest annoyance for Carl Henry is that you guys went down the following season and they stayed up and they don't get the credit for it.
Yeah, which is an amazing achievement because staying up in the Premier League it's just. I remember playing in the Premier League that year, thinking like winning. I'm not sure if we did win away from home, but playing away from home was so hard. Like a win is gold dust, especially for a club like Wolves in that year that haven't spent X amount of money. And so what those guys did was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, getting promoted is one thing. I think to stay up, unfortunately, when you stay up, you don't get anything for it. But I think maybe if you spoke to Mick and managers who have done that, might even argue that staying up was a bigger achievement than actually getting up. I don't know. But those guys deserve a huge amount. It was a really good team that went up that year as well. Your team I remember playing against you. I remember playing here actually. Some really good players.
I mean, that Premiership season that you had, there were some remarkable games in that campaign. Not least of which the 3-3 at Man City, where you score an absolute beauty into the top corner.
Yeah, I think we conceded quite. I think Sean Wright Phillips scored the equaliser, didn't he?
90 plus.
Was it that? Yeah. I think we were 3-1 up, actually, weren't we?
You were 2-0 up.
2-0 up.
And then it went back to 2-2, and then you went 3-2 up.
Yeah. That's the only time I've played there, actually.
I mean, some of those games, that team still, it was, I think sometimes there's that element of like, there was a group of you that, even though you admit that you wanted more players to come in, you didn't really give it up.
I mean, Chris, you'll know yourself as a footballer. If you've got anything about you, that's what you do. Everybody shows it in different ways. I can't tackle to save my life. One thing I loved about Glenn when he was here, if you didn't tackle or run around like a head case, you didn't play. And I remember looking at him thinking, hang on a minute, you were the opposite of that. But it was his understanding of what it takes to be a footballer if you want to be a footballer. And I loved that about him, and he kind of added that to people's games. I can't tackle, I can't head the ball. I've never scored a header in my life like this man is. He scored loads. But Glenn had you doing those things, tackling, running around, winning headers, tracking back, all the stuff that I probably didn't do and should have done. But it's that recognition of what it takes or what you need to. I always remember playing United here. And it's interesting, you got a picture of Keith Downing up there. I remember playing United here and we beat them 1-0. Kenny Miller scored. But I remember Keith Downing saying to me before the game, look, Sparky, run around, tackle and win your headers. He said, you'll get a standing ovation for that. And he said, that's what you're paid to do. And I've never forgot that. And I still say that to players now. I never forgot that.
See, it's funny that you bring Glenn Hoddle up there because it's kind of, I guess, a period of time that Wolves fans don't look back in great favour. But a lot of the players, ex-players that we've had on, speak very highly of Glenn, the way that he went about, his tactical knowledge, everything about it. So give us a little bit more.
He was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And what a lot of people probably don't know or won't remember or are not aware of, in the year, I think we finished 7th and we took a lot of flack, and fair enough, absolutely, club like us. I think we were favourites to go up, and we had a squad that should have went up, but really early in the season, I think we started really well, and Carl Court had a load of goals early doors. He got injured for a long period of time. Kenny Miller, Incy got injured, third game of the season, was out for a long time. I think Jackie McNamara had done his cruciate, and Glenn was really, really unlucky with injuries that year. And I think, did he finish 7th?
You finished 7th, but you were, I think, about 8 points off.
Yeah, and I actually honestly believed as a player that year what he achieved was really good considering what... I remember walking away from that thinking what you've achieved this year is actually brilliant considering what you had available to you. I thought it was a really good achievement considering I'd played in a team that an outstanding team in my first year here that didn't go up but played some scintillating football, and the following year having gone up, I think Glenn's achievement to do what he did was actually incredibly impressive. But the bottom line is, you big club, big players, big team, big stadium, full house, huge support. You know, to finish 7th is actually just not good enough, and there's no getting away from that. And I think because of that, he probably suffered. I remember feeling really sorry for him. We played a game at home. I think it was Coventry. We were 1-0 up at half time. We got booed off. We won 1-0. We got booed off. There was a huge big banner in the top of the stand saying Hoddle out. And I remember feeling really, really disappointed for him and upset for him because he was a brilliant coach. Like, so far ahead of his time, it was untrue.
Well, we're going to talk more about the Glenn Hoddle era on our podcast extra, which is available to download from all the usual places. And I say there will be lots of fans who want to thank you for Cardiff alone, but also some of the other great moments as well. Plenty more to discuss with Mark Kennedy on the Old Gold Club, powered by Blythe Group.